Rest now. The press continues. In workshops, in factories, in studios, quietly, steadily, inevitably, the same motion, the same principle, the same ancient dance of ink and paper and pressure. Sleep. The machine does not need you. It has never needed you. Tonight, there is no schedule waiting for you. No notification. No reminder. No deadline. This is not a story you need to follow. It is a story you can rest beside. If you miss parts of it, nothing is lost. The words will continue. The machine will continue, whether you listen or not. Tonight, we are not rushing forward. We are moving slowly, back and forth, across time, across land, across quiet rooms where candles burned low and fingers grew numb with cold. This is a story about repetition, about processes that do not change quickly, about motions that have been practiced for hundreds of years, in workshops, in factories, in rooms filled with the smell of ink and oil. It is a story about ink, about paper, about pressure, and about how these simple things learn to carry human thought across continents, without sound, without voice. You do not need to picture anything clearly. Let the images blur. Let the names fade into the background like old letters on weathered stone. Tonight, we are simply listening to something that has always been there, something that shaped the way humans share their minds with strangers, something that turned thought into object, idea into artifact. The printing press, quiet. Machine that never spoke, but gave voice to millions. A device that never moved quickly, but changed everything. Rest now. Let the story wash over you. Like ink spreading through dampened paper. Slow, inevitable, complete. The best quills came from geese, from the outer wing feathers, taken in spring, cut at precise angles. In scriptoriums, the copying rooms of medieval monasteries, silence was maintained, enforced, essential. Before printing presses existed, books were not common objects. They were rare presences, held, guarded, sometimes chained to desks in cathedral libraries with iron links as thick as a finger. Across Europe, across the Middle East, across Asia, knowledge lived in rooms, in monasteries perched on hilltops where wind howled through winter nights. They were rare presences, held, guarded, sometimes chained to desks in cathedral libraries with iron links as thick as a finger. In courts tucked behind fortress walls where privilege determined access. In private collections accessible only to the wealthy, the powerful. Writing was a profession, a discipline, a lifetime skill. Scribes learned letterforms slowly, years of practice. First copying alphabets, then words, then sentences, then entire pages. They practiced spacing between words that had no fixed distance, no standard. Each scribe developed personal rhythms, personal habits. They controlled ink flow with tools made from reeds, from feathers, from carefully split quills that required constant resharpening. The best quills came from geese, from the outer wing feathers, taken in spring, cut at precise angles. In scriptoriums, the copying rooms of medieval monasteries, silence was maintained, enforced, essential. Light came from narrow windows, high windows that protected manuscripts from thieves but provided little warmth. Cold seeped through stone walls in winter. Fingers cramped around quills, knuckles stiffened, ink thickened in its horn. Scribes worked at angled desks, standing sometimes, sitting on backless benches, positions that encouraged wakefulness, discouraged comfort. Mistakes mattered. Corrections showed. Scraped parchment left thin spots, visible reminders of error. Every page carried the marks of its maker, the pressure of their hand, the steadiness of their line, the fatigue of their afternoon. A book was not identical to another book. Even copies were different. One scribe might abbreviate frequently, saving time, saving parchment. Another might ornament capitals, adding flourishes, personal style, individual expression. A third might misread a word and alter meaning without knowing, copying an error that would propagate through future generations. This gave books a presence, weight, personality. Each volume was unique. Each carried the trace of human hands. But it also limited them. A single Bible could take months to complete. A year, sometimes longer if elaborate. If illuminated with gold leaf and mineral pigments ground by hand. Large monasteries might have a dozen scribes working simultaneously. Smaller ones, only one or two. Production was slow, measured, precious. Ideas moved as fast as horses, as ships tilting across the Mediterranean under lateen sails, as walking messengers crossing alpine passes on foot with letters sewn into their clothing. A letter sent from Rome to Paris might take weeks. Longer in winter when roads turned to mud, when rivers flooded. A book sent from Baghdad to Cordoba, months, perhaps a year, carried by merchants, by pilgrims, by scholars moving between centers of learning. And for a long time, this was enough. The world moved at the speed of human footsteps, of sailing winds, of seasonal rhythms that had governed civilizations for millennia, until cities grew louder, more crowded, more complex. Until trade increased along the Silk Road, carrying not just silk and spices, but ideas, mathematics, astronomy, philosophy. Until universities formed in Bologna in 1088, in Paris by 1150, in Oxford shortly after, and students wanted more words than hands could supply. Hundreds of students, thousands eventually, all needing the same texts, the same lectures in written form. Until the desire for knowledge exceeded the capacity of human endurance to copy it. Until something had to change. Long before mechanical presses appeared in Europe, printing already existed elsewhere. In East Asia, woodblock printing had been practiced for centuries. Since the Tang dynasty, since the 8th century, since before Charlemagne was crowned, entire pages were carved into wood, one block, one page, mirror reversed so the printed image would read correctly. The work required precision, patience, endurance that rivaled the scribes of Europe. Carvers worked with fine chisels, metal tools sharpened to hair-thin edges. They followed brushwork, calligraphy transferred to the wood surface, every stroke preserved, every nuance maintained. They removed everything that was not text, everything that was not image, cutting away the negative space, the emptiness that would remain white on the page. The wood itself mattered: pearwood, jujube, dense hardwoods that resisted wear, that could survive thousands of impressions. Once carved, the block could be reused again and again. Ink was applied with brushes, dabbed, spread evenly. Water-based inks that dried quickly, that didn't puddle or smear. Paper was laid carefully, smoothed with a pad, a dry brush, gentle pressure that transferred ink without crushing fibers. This allowed text to spread. The Diamond Sutra, one of the oldest surviving printed books, was created this way in 868. A scroll over 16 feet long, intricate, beautiful, precise. Religious writings multiplied, Buddhist sutras, Confucian classics, Taoist texts. Administrative documents, tax records, census information, imperial decrees, poetry, the works of Li Bai, Du Fu, Wang Wei, accessible beyond court circles. Calendars became common, essential for agricultural societies, for determining planting times, harvest times, festival days. In China, in Korea, in Japan, woodblock printing became refined, sophisticated, essential to governance and culture. They removed everything that was not text, everything that was not image, cutting away the negative space, the emptiness that would remain white on the page. The wood itself mattered: pearwood, jujube, dense hardwoods that resisted wear, that could survive thousands of impressions. Once carved, the block could be reused again and again. Ink was applied with brushes, dabbed, spread evenly. Water-based inks that dried quickly, that didn't puddle or smear. Paper was laid carefully, smoothed with a pad, a dry brush, gentle pressure that transferred ink without crushing fibers. This allowed text to spread. The Diamond Sutra, one of the oldest surviving printed books, was created this way in 868. A scroll over 16 feet long, intricate, beautiful, precise. Religious writings multiplied, Buddhist sutras, Confucian classics, Taoist texts. Administrative documents, tax records, census information, imperial decrees, poetry, the works of Li Bai, Du Fu, Wang Wei, accessible beyond court circles. Calendars became common, essential for agricultural societies, for determining planting times, harvest times, festival days. In China, in Korea, in Japan, woodblock printing became refined, sophisticated, essential to governance and culture. Multi-color printing developed, blocks carved for each color, registered carefully, aligned by eye and by corner marks. But flexibility was limited. Change was slow. A single error required recarving the entire block. A revision meant starting again. Adaptation required starting again, carving a new block entirely. Hours of work, days, weeks for complex pages. Movable type existed here too. Bai Sheng developed it in China during the 11th century, around 1040, using clay, ceramic characters, fragile, difficult. Later versions used wood, carved individually, stored in vast cases. Then metal, bronze, iron, more durable, more precise. Korea developed sophisticated metal movable type in the 13th century. Earlier than Europe, cast in bronze, beautifully crafted. But thousands of characters made reuse difficult. Chinese requires thousands of distinct characters for literacy. Korean Hangul eventually simplified this, but classical texts used Chinese characters. Storage was complex. Cases with hundreds of compartments, thousands of pieces. Finding the right character took time. Sorting after printing took time. Returning each character to its proper location. For languages with thousands of symbols, woodblock printing often remained more practical. The idea was present. The technology was real. The system was different. Printing was not absent from the world before Gutenberg. It was not waiting to be invented. It was simply shaped by language, by culture, by geography, by the specific needs and constraints of different civilizations. Alphabetic systems with fewer symbols would find different possibilities, different efficiencies, different futures. By the early 15th century, Europe was quietly changing. Paper was becoming cheaper, no longer a luxury, no longer rare. Mills appeared along rivers, the Fabriano region in Italy, where streams descended from the Apennines, the areas around Troyes in France, the valleys of Catalonia. Paper making learned from contact with the Islamic world during the Crusades and the coexistence in Spain, with techniques that had traveled from China through Samarkand and Damascus, was spreading. Water-powered mills hammered linen rags into pulp, ground them between massive stones. The pulp was diluted, spread on screens, pressed, dried, sized with gelatin to prevent ink from bleeding. Each region developed slight variations, different textures, different weights, different watermarks pressed into the drying paper. Trade routes connected cities. The Hanseatic League linked the Baltic, Lübeck, Hamburg, Danzig, Bergen. The Rhine carried goods inland from the North Sea to Switzerland, past Cologne, past Mainz, past Strasbourg, past Basel. Ports like Venice and Genoa linked continents, Mediterranean trade, spices and silks arriving from the east, ideas arriving too. Demand increased slowly, then steadily. Universities multiplied. Paris became a centre of theology, Bologna of law, Oxford of natural philosophy. Students needed texts, lectionaries for religious study, grammars for Latin, Aristotle's logic, Euclid's geometry, Ptolemy's astronomy. The Perseus system developed, licensed copyists, approved exemplars, students renting sections to copy themselves. But it wasn't enough. Couldn't scale, couldn't keep pace. Courts needed records, royal courts, ducal courts, episcopal courts, legal codes, municipal ordinances, royal decrees, treaties, contracts, deeds. Documentation was expanding. Governance was becoming more complex, more bureaucratic, more dependent on written records. Churches needed consistency, liturgical books that matched, missals used at every Mass, breviaries for daily prayer, books of hours for private devotion. Variation in liturgical texts caused problems, confusion, questions of proper practice. Literacy was expanding beyond the clergy. Merchant families sought education for their sons, for business, for social advancement. Guilds required documentation, rules, membership records, contracts, apprenticeship agreements. The commercial revolution created demand. Banking, insurance, long-distance trade, all required paperwork, records, trust. What was missing was a machine that could keep up. A system that could produce not one copy, but dozens, hundreds, eventually thousands. Something that could turn text into a commodity. Stable, repeatable, affordable, reliable. The technology was almost there. Metal casting, mechanical engineering, papermaking, ink chemistry. All the pieces existed. They just needed to be combined, refined, perfected. In agricultural regions of Europe, presses were familiar tools. Wine presses in the valleys of the Rhine, timber frames as tall as a man, massive screws carved from oak, olive, presses along the Mediterranean, stone weights, lever systems, pressure that extracted oil from crushed fruit, cloth presses in Flanders, finishing woolens, smoothing surfaces, removing wrinkles and irregularities. They used screws, heavy wooden frames that distributed force, leverage that transformed human effort into concentrated pressure. These presses transformed rotation into downward force. The screw descended slowly, steadily, threads carved into wood engaging with threads carved into the frame. One full rotation of the bar might lower the platen only an inch, but with tremendous force, enough to crush grapes to pulp, to extract every drop, pressing grapes, pressing cloth, flattening fibers, extracting liquid, shaping material. Someone imagined using that force not to crush matter, but to move ink. Ink. From raised metal to weighting paper, evenly, completely, repeatedly, without variation. This idea emerged where metal was already mastered, where goldsmiths worked, where coins were minted, where coins were cast in precise molds, identical pieces, standardized weight, reliable value, where goldsmiths knew alloys, melting points, hardness, malleability, the properties of metals mixed in specific proportions, where tools were precise enough to craft jewelry, weapons, clock mechanisms, intricate locks, where punch cutting was understood, carving designs into hard steel, creating tools that could stamp impressions into softer metals. Mechanical thinking mattered, engineering mattered. The understanding that complex outcomes could emerge from simple mechanisms properly arranged. And Europe had it, in the workshops of Mainz, Strasbourg, Nuremberg, Augsburg. Johannes Gutenberg, a goldsmith by training, familiar with metalwork, familiar with investment and debt and the complexities of financing innovation, combined these technologies. Not inventing from nothing, not divine inspiration, but synthesis, adaptation, careful refinement. Around 1440, in Mainz, along the Rhine where water traffic was constant and trade connections ran deep, the mechanical printing press emerged. Gutenberg combined the wine press, the punch and matrix system of metal working, the growing availability of paper, and oil-based inks that adhered to metal type. Each element was known, but the combination was new. The integration was new. The system was new. And the results would transform the world. Slowly, steadily, inevitably. Movable type changed everything quietly. Each letter became an object, cast once, used many times, sorted into cases, arranged into words, into lines, into pages, then sorted again, reused, rearranged. Metal type required balance, precision, experimentation. Too soft, it deformed under pressure. Letters crushed. Became illegible after a few dozen impressions. Too hard, it shattered. Brittle metal cracking under the force of the press. Too brittle, it cracked, especially at fine details. Serifs, thin strokes, delicate curves. Loy solved this. Lead for malleability. Soft enough to cast cleanly, to flow into fine details. Tin for hardness, added strength, prevented deformation. Antimony to prevent shrinkage during cooling. Metal contracts as it solidifies. Antimony counteracts this, ensures precision. The proportions mattered. The exact ratio determined performance. Durability, clarity. The temperature mattered. Too hot, the mold could crack. Too cool, the metal wouldn't flow properly, wouldn't fill the matrix completely. The mold mattered. The hand mold Gutenberg developed. A two-part device, adjustable, precise. The matrix fit into the bottom. The mold closed around it. Molten metal poured in, cooled rapidly. Seconds later, a piece of type emerged, nearly identical to every other piece from that matrix. Each piece of type was identical to its siblings. Every eye matched every other in height, in width, in the shape of its face. Every sut had a same base rose to the same X height, carried the same weight. This uniformity was radical, revolutionary. Before printing, no two letters were ever exactly alike, even in the same manuscript, even from the same scribe. Human hands vary, pressure changes, attention wavers, fatigue accumulates, but cast metal, properly made, achieves consistency impossible for human hands. Letters were arranged by hand. Compositors worked from cases divided into compartments. Uppercase for capitals, lowercase for minuscules. The origin of terms still used today. Common letters in easy reach. In the center, close, accessible without looking. The letter, most common in most European languages. Given prime position. Large compartment. Easy access. Rare letters farther away. Qui and Z in distant corners. Smaller compartments. Less space needed. Words formed backward. The compositor reading text. Selecting letters. Placing them right to left. Lines built right to left. The compositor read mirror images in their mind. Developed the skill through years of practice. Apprentices learned slowly, made errors, transposed letters, confused similar shapes. Masters worked quickly, efficiently, fingers moving without conscious thought. Muscle memory. Spacing mattered. Too tight. Letters touched, merged, became illegible. Too loose. Words fell apart, lost coherence. The eye couldn't connect them. Thin strips of lead, leading, created space between lines. Prevented ascenders from one line touching descenders from the line above. Margins mattered. White space balanced black ink. Guided the eye. Created rhythm on the page. Wide margins. Narrow margins. Asymmetric margins. Each created different effects, different feelings. Balance mattered. A page tilted left or right revealed uneven distribution. Poor craftsmanship. Apprentice work. The press itself responded slowly, deliberately. The screw turned. The bar moved. 2 men often. One on each end. Pulling in rhythm. The platen descended. A flat surface. Even pressure distributed across the entire form. Weight transferred through wood, through metal, through carefully applied pressure that had to be strong enough to transfer ink, but gentle enough not to crush the paper, not to damage the type. Ink met paper. For a moment. Just long enough. Then separation. The screw reversed. The platen lifted. The tympan opened. The reveal. Words appeared. Sharp, clear, black against white, identical to the previous sheet, and the next, and the one after that. This was not speed. Not initially. A hand press might produce 200 sheets per day, per side. But it was reliability, consistency, multiplication. Gutenberg's 42-line Bible, completed around 1455, demonstrated this reliability. But it was reliability, consistency, multiplication. Gutenberg's 42-line Bible, completed around 1455, demonstrated this reliability. Approximately 180 copies, some on paper, some on vellum. Each page identical to its counterparts in other copies. Each letter crisp, sharp, uniform. Readers had never seen such consistency, such clarity, such perfection. The printed word became authoritative, not because it was better written, not because it contained better ideas, but because it was exact, trustworthy, repeatable, beyond the variation of human hands. Multiple readers could reference the same edition, the same page, the same line. Scholarship became more precise, arguments more specific, citations more reliable. Printing presses moved as people moved. Printers relocated, seeking opportunity, escaping guild restrictions that limited who could practice trades in certain cities, following patrons, fleeing conflicts. Rivers carried presses, the Rhine flowing north through Cologne toward the Low Countries, through Düsseldorf, through Arnhem, the Danube east toward Vienna, past Ulm, past Regensburg, into the heartland of the Holy Roman Empire. The Seine through Paris, past Rouen, toward the sea. The Thames connecting London to the coast. The Rhone connecting Lyon to the Mediterranean. Rivers were highways, reliable, navigable most of the year, cheaper than overland transport, safer sometimes. Roads carried type, wooden cases packed carefully. Straw padding, canvas wrapping, protected from moisture, from shock, from the jolting of wagons on rutted roads. Ports carried paper, from Italy, where the best mills operated, from France, from mills that multiplied near flowing water wherever rags could be collected. Ships brought paper from Genoa to Barcelona, from Venice to Dubrovnik, from French ports to England. Cities became nodes, linked by commerce, by shared methods, by apprentices who learned in one city and practiced in another. Venice became a printing capital. By 1500, over 150 printing houses operated there, more than anywhere else in Europe. Aldus Manutius refined italic type. Slanted, compact, elegant, based on humanist handwriting. He printed Greek classics in the original language. Homer, Plato, Aristotle, making them accessible to scholars across Europe. He pioneered the portable book, the octavo format. Small, affordable, carried easily, read privately. Paris became a center, the Sorbonne, student demand. Theological texts, philosophical treatises, lion. At the confluence of trade routes, between France and Italy, between north and south, Antwerp, port city, commercial hub, gateway to the Low Countries, to England, Vauxhall, on the Rhine, crossroads, connected to Germanic lands, to Switzerland, to Italy through the passes, Nuremberg, imperial city, wealthy, technically sophisticated, home to craftsmen, metal workers, artists. Each became a center. Each developed specialties, reputations, networks. Each region adapted details. Paper thickness varied by local production, by available materials, by water quality. Ink recipes differed. Some used linseed oil, pressed from flax seeds. Others walnut oil, different viscosity, different drying time, different sheen. Lamb-black for pigment, soot collected from oil lamps, ground fine, mixed with varnish, or soot from burned resin, pine sap, denser, darker. Letter shapes evolved locally. Roman type in Italy, clean, classical, based on ancient inscriptions. Gothic type in Germany, angular, dense, traditional, familiar to readers accustomed to manuscript hands. Civilité type in France, cursive, flowing, mimicking French handwriting. Printing became local and universal at the same time. Techniques standardized. The basic process remained the same. Type, ink, pressure, paper. But aesthetics diversified. A book printed in Venice looked different from one printed in Nuremberg. Different type, different spacing, different proportions, different ornament, different title page layouts, different initial capitals, different decorative borders. Yet the process underneath remained the same. By 1500, printing existed in over 250 European cities. By 1500, an estimated 20 million books had been printed. More books than had been produced in all previous centuries of manuscript culture combined. Knowledge accelerated. Information spread. Ideas collided. The world was changing, and the printing press was the engine. Silent, steady, relentless. Printing required investment, substantial investment. Presses were expensive. Wooden frames, iron screws, metal platens, precision construction. A single press might cost as much as a small house. Paper required storage, dry conditions, consistent temperature, protection from mice, from mold, from fire. A print run of 1,000 copies might require a ream of paper. Expensive, bulky. Ink required supply. Consistent batches. Reliable sourcing. Quality control. Type required ongoing investment. Matrices wore out. Type damaged. New fonts designed. Early publishers were financiers, businessmen, calculators. They assessed demand, studied markets, predicted what would sell, Where? To whom? They calculated risk, the cost of production, the price of materials, the wages of workers, the expense of distribution. They predicted markets, what students needed, what priests wanted, what wealthy patrons collected. They printed what would sell, what would be needed, what would be replaced. Religious texts, the Bible in Latin, the Vulgate, approved, standard, essential. Books of hours, private devotional texts, customizable, personal, popular among the wealthy. Legal codes, municipal ordinances, collections of laws, reference works for courts, for lawyers, for administrators, royal decrees, treaties, contracts, official documents, educational manuals, grammars teaching Latin, the universal language of learning. Publishing houses formed in cities, near universities where students created demand, reliable, seasonal, predictable. Near courts where administration required documentation, governments needed printing. Near markets where merchants gathered, where distribution networks existed, where buyers assembled. The Koberger family in Nuremberg. Anton Koberger operated 24 presses, employed 100 workers. Distribution network across Europe, agents in major cities, representatives at trade fairs, Frankfurt Book Fair, Leipzig Book Fair, gathering points, meeting places, where publishers traded, negotiated, planned. Christopher Plantin in Antwerp, publishing in multiple languages, Latin, Spanish, French, Dutch, supplying the Spanish Empire with liturgical texts, with administrative manuals, navigating religious tensions, Protestant, Catholic, censorship, index of prohibited books. Publishers learned to be careful, political, strategic. The book became standardized, predictable, familiar. Title pages emerged, identifying printer, place, date, sometimes with a printer's mark, a logo, a symbol. Page numbers became common, signatures for binding. Catchwords at the bottom of pages, tables of contents, alphabetical indexes, finding aids, navigation tools. The book became a tool, designed, structured, accessible, user-friendly. Margins for annotations. Readers expected to write in books, to engage, to argue, to note. Standardized formats. Folio, quarto, what octavo. Size determined use. Knowledge became reproducible, no longer confined to single rooms, single cities, single minds. An idea printed in Basel could be read in Krakow, in London, in Salamanca, in Edinburgh. Identical, simultaneously. Multiple readers engaging with the same text, at the same time, in different places. This changed thought itself. Scholars could reference the same page, the same line, the same word. Arguments became precise, Citations became possible. Verification became practical. Consensus could form. Disagreement could be specific. Progress could accelerate. A print shop was rhythmic. Ink. Align. Press. Release. The workday began early. Dawn. Sometimes before. Compositors set type. Standing at their cases. Arranging letters. Building lines. Pressmen prepared ink. Grinding pigments. Mixing oils. Testing consistency. Apprentices dampened paper. Not too wet. Not too dry. Just right for impression. Water sprayed lightly. Paper stacked between damp cloths. Left overnight. Fibers relaxing. Accepting ink better. The rhythm established itself. One pressman inked the form. 2 leather balls. Dabbing. Spreading. Even coverage. Another positioned paper. On the tympan, a hinged frame. Covered with parchment. The tympan folded down. The frisket placed. A frame protecting margins. Preventing smudges. Both pressmen pulled the bar. Together. In rhythm. Practiced motion. The screw descended. The platen pressed. 1 heartbeat. 2. Then reversal. The platen lifted. The tympan opened. Pages dried on racks. Lines strung across the room. Sheets hanging. Stacks grew slowly. Steadily. One side printed. Then the other. Perfecting. Errors were corrected. Stop press corrections. Mid-run. When mistakes were noticed. Type adjusted. Reprinting. Some copies with errors. Some without. The work was physical. Arms pulling. Shoulders bracing. Back straining. Repetitive. The same motions. Hundreds of times. Thousands. Quietly demanding. Attention required. Precision necessary. Fatigue accumulating. Printing was labor, but it was steady labor. Skilled labor. Respected labor. A good pressman knew pressure. Could feel when the platen sat wrong. When alignment was off. When ink coverage was uneven. Too much ink. Too little. The press rewarded patience. Rushing caused errors. Damaged type. Wasted paper. Lost money. Shops developed rhythms. Daily. Weekly. Seasonal patterns. Legal texts before court sessions. When lawyers needed references. Liturgical books before feast days. Christmas. Easter. When demand peaked. University texts before term. Students arriving. Needing books. Reliable market. Workers lived above shops. In adjacent buildings. Close. Available. Ate together. Shared meals. Developed camaraderie. Rivalries. Relationships. Trained together. Apprentices learning from journeymen. Journeymen learning from masters. The smell of ink. Linseed oil. Varnish. Lampblack. Distinctive. Pervasive. The sound of the press. Creaking wood. Clicking mechanisms. Rhythmic. Constant. The texture of paper, dampened, pressed, drying, tactile. These became familiar, daily, normal, the background of life. A world measured in sheets, in signatures, in editions. Success measured in sales, in reputation, in steady work. The printing house as community, as economy, as culture. Eventually, hand power was not enough. Steam entered workshops, first in England, in the early 19th century. London, Friedrich Koenig, a German printer, an engineer, experimenting. Steam-powered presses. Cylinders replaced flat platens. Paper fed continuously from rolls. The cylinder rotated. The form moved beneath it. Pressure continuous. Motion constant. The Times of London adopted Koenig's press in 1814. Production increased dramatically. 1,000 sheets per hour, then more. Speeds impossible by hand. Production increased dramatically. Thousands of sheets per hour. Numbers that would have seemed impossible to earlier printers. Cities with coal led this change. Manchester, Birmingham, Sheffield, Pittsburgh, Chicago. Factories clustered near railroads, near canals, transportation networks, distribution systems, where paper mills operated, where coal was cheap, where labor was available, where distribution was possible. Rail connections, port access, market reach. Newspapers multiplied. Daily editions became feasible, affordable, accessible. Penny papers. Mass circulation. Information democratized. Public literacy increased. Schools expanded. Reading became common, expected. Printing supported it, enabled it, accelerated it. Textbooks, primers, readers, educational materials mass-produced. Steam power changed the scale, but not the principle. Still pressure, still ink, still paper, still transfer, just faster, louder, more demanding, hungrier for material. Iron frames replaced wood, stronger, more stable, more precise, less vibration. Typesetting remained manual until the 1880s. Compositors still setting type by hand, letter by letter, line by line. Then linotype machines appeared. Ottmar Mergenthaler. 1886. Operators typed on a keyboard. Matrices dropped into place. Entire lines cast at once. Molten metal flowed, cooled, solidified. A slug of type. A complete line. Speed increased again. A compositor could set 5 lines per minute. Monotype machines cast individual letters mechanically. Keyboard separated from caster. Paper tape punched, then fed through the caster. Letters assembled automatically. Speed increased again. Complexity increased. Capital requirements increased. Printing became industrial. Factories. Shift work. Mass production. But the craft remained underneath. Skilled operators, precision work, quality control, proofreaders, pressmen, bindery workers, entire industries, the printed word everywhere, newspapers, magazines, books, catalogues, advertisements. Rotary presses never stopped moving. Paper rolled from massive spools. Tons of paper, miles of paper, fed through cylinders. Printing plates wrapped around rotating drums. Printed on both sides, simultaneously. Web-fed presses, continuous operation. Cut, folded, stacked. All in line, all automatic. The process became continuous, uninterrupted, relentless. Offset lithography refined contact. Developed in the early 20th century, the plate never touched paper directly. Ink transferred to a rubber blanket first. A cylinder covered with rubber, resilient, forgiving. Then to paper. The blanket conformed to slight irregularities, compensated, improved quality. This reduced wear. Plates lasted longer. Thousands of impressions. Tens of thousands. Improved clarity. Sharper images. Better halftones. More detail. Extended plate life. Reduced costs. Improved economics. Printing scaled globally. Quietly. Everywhere. Becoming invisible infrastructure. Forms. Books. Newspapers. Magazines. All offset. Packaging. Labels. Cartons. Wrappers. Everything printed. The press faded into the background. Became invisible. Assumed. Taken for granted. Long pause. Color printing developed. Four-color process. CMYK. Cyan. Magenta. Yellow. Black. 4 plates. 4 passes. Or 4 stations. Colors overlapping. Mixing optically. Halftones allowed photographs. Dots of varying size, creating the illusion of continuous tone. Screen angles. Rosette patterns. Avoiding moire. By the mid-20th century, color printing was routine. Magazines, advertisements, packaging, photographic reproduction, illustrations, art books, all possible. By the 20th century, printing touched everything. Propaganda posters in wartime, First World War, Second World War. The printed word was everywhere. Mass-produced, disposable sometimes, essential always. Yet the principle remained unchanged. Pressure, transfer, reproduction. From Gutenberg's hand press to modern offset presses running at thousands of sheets per hour, the fundamental idea persisted. Ink meets paper through pressure. Images multiply. Information spreads. Digital text flickers. Printed text rests. It does not ask for power. It does not refresh. It does not update. It does not require batteries. It waits, patiently, indefinitely. A printed book exists independently. It does not require infrastructure, does not require connectivity, does not require compatible software. It survives water better than electronics, can be dried, restored, still readable, survives time better than magnetic storage, better than optical storage. Acid-free paper lasts centuries. This is why printing remains. Even as digital media dominates, even as screens proliferate, archival printing uses acid-free paper, pH neutral, linen-free, stable, lasting ink, carbon-based, fade-resistant, permanent, stable binding, sewn signatures, lasting adhesives. Important documents are still printed. Contracts, certificates, diplomas, treaties. Because physical presence matters. Because signatures matter. Because paper carries weight. Legal weight, cultural weight, psychological weight. Digital and print coexist. Serve different needs, different purposes. Printing is no longer the only way to reproduce text, but it remains a way, a trusted way. Permanent, tangible, real. Books as objects, as possessions, as gifts, as heirlooms. Fine printing continues. Limited editions, letterpress revival, craft printing, artists making books, poets, printmakers, maintaining traditions, exploring possibilities. The press endures, transformed, adapted, but recognizable. Still pressure, still ink, still paper, still transfer, still multiplication, still distribution. The principle remains. The printing press has crossed centuries. It has crossed borders, languages, empires, revolutions. From Mainz to Venice, from London to New York, from Paris to Tokyo, from hand presses operated by two men to machines that fill warehouses and run automatically. And still, it presses ink, paper, time. The principle unchanged beneath all the evolution, transfer, reproduction, distribution. Ideas made physical, thoughts made permanent, voices made portable. If you are awake, you may listen. If you are asleep, the machine continues. Without you, press is running overnight in printing plants, newspapers for morning delivery, books for distant readers, magazines for subscribers. Nothing is required now. Nothing remains unfinished. Only the rhythm, the steady rhythm that has accompanied human thought for more than 500 years. A rhythm that turned manuscript into book, scarcity into abundance, silence into conversation across time and space. A rhythm that carried the Reformation, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, the scientific revolution. That spread novels, newspapers, pamphlets, ideas, arguments, dreams.